Today we're going to talk about how to properly EQ high-gain guitars. If you're familiar with my YouTube channel, you may know that I like to play modeling units and high-gain guitars, especially these guitars, Harley Benton Fusions. And I put out a couple of videos where I was introducing how to get good tones out of your favorite modeling units. Also, I'm selling preset packs with my tones, the best high-gain tones ever, in my opinion at least. So if you would like to get my preset packs, please contact me on Facebook or Instagram. The links are in the description below. And of course, consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already. But today I would like to talk a little bit about how I EQ high-gain guitars, whether if it is for a live situation or a recording situation. And there are some frequencies which I found out over the time which are always some kind of nasty in a high-gain guitar tone, and other frequencies which are quite helpful. But today I would like to focus maybe on the frequencies which are nasty in my opinion. So first of all, I'm using my Fractal Audio FM9. The editor is here. And currently I'm playing one preset out of my preset pack, which is more or less designed for live usage. So the difference between recording tones and live tones, in my opinion, is mostly in the lows and the highs. So in other words, if you have a well-balanced guitar tone that doesn't come with too much annoying frequencies within the mids, then I always tend to cut a little bit of the highs and the lows for a good live tone. And I like to have a very fat live tone, so I cut usually a lot of the highs. But let's switch to my recording preset, which may sound quite different than this tone. This was, as the name says, a tone match which I did of the Plini plugin by Mooer GE1000. And yeah, it sounds very harsh. And that is the case with most of the guitar tones which I got from other people or from the manufacturers. So first of all, let's address the high and the low cut. These are things which are very helpful in a live situation, but also in a recording situation. In a recording situation, usually I would apply these afterwards in my DAW. In a live situation, usually I set the high cut somewhere around 80 Hertz, depends on the slope. And the low cut and the high cut, usually I set it around maybe 5.5K. Sometimes a little bit lower if there are lots of highs. But let's leave it at around 8K, where I would set it for recording situation. That doesn't mean that later on cut some more highs. And let's focus on the frequencies in between, let's say 80 Hertz and 8K, because that is usually what I use to, where the guitar tone lives. So in other words, these are the frequencies you have to dial in properly. And the first thing, which I personally find annoying in almost all situations, is around the 6K. So let me see what this does if we raise the 6K in a very slope. So, sorry, 6K is this. So these frequencies. Of course, I don't boost it. Usually I dial these out. And if I do this, usually if I dial out some frequencies, I do this in a very narrow bandwidth here. because I want to address exactly the frequencies. And as this goes only up to 10, yeah, I do it. And of course, the frequencies around the 6K, they can also be a little bit annoying. It's not almost exactly, but it's in that region, in my opinion. So I'd recommend to dial these out first. You can hear now they're coming back immediately. Maybe let's get rid of the high cut so that we can hear clearly what it does. And the thing is, if you cut everything above 5K, which I do sometimes in a live situation, you're also losing the 8K, which is maybe necessary for some situations. It has this nice guitar sizzle that you want to have, especially in a recording situation. For live, it's maybe not so important. But this is one frequency which I highly recommend to start with dialing out 6K. And especially for live, you can do it more. For recording, sometimes I end up not cutting the highs, just dialing out the 6K. So here we go, dialing out 6K. And without this EQ, I hope you can hear it. On my studio monitors, I can hear it clearly, the difference. Okay. Another frequency which is annoying or causing problems is around the 250 Hertz. Especially when you're palm muting and chugging. If you have too much of these frequencies, it can get really muddy. So if you have that kind of tone, especially when chugging on the B, then if you have too much 250 Hertz, it sounds really annoying. And so let's dial these out. And of course, it's not the case, or it's not always the case that these frequencies are causing problems. Depends on your amp and on your guitar. So with the Les Paul and maybe a low mid heavy amplifier, like maybe the Dual Recto, maybe you should keep an eye on these frequencies. With this tone, I think I wouldn't dial out the 250 Hertz because it sounds already very high, heavy. If that is a word, it has more highs than lows. But yeah, that is my advice, to keep an eye on these frequencies if you find your overall tone too bass heavy or too muddy. Of course, the low bass frequencies, like maybe around 80 Hertz or lower, they can cause problems in a live situation. That depends on if you're playing through a huge system with subs and the construction maybe. But I'd recommend to leave these frequencies to be cut by your front of house engineer, because he knows how it sounds. And yeah, so these are my two main frequencies which I dial out usually if they're causing problems, especially the 6K are almost in every situation I dial these out. Another frequency range which is kind of annoying is around maybe the 800 Hertz, especially if you boost your amp. These frequencies are boosted in front of your amp, the tube screamer, to get more gain. But then afterwards you should dial these out again, because they can get too, well, boxy sounding, or honky is this area. So this is the honky area, and it can also be a little bit lower or higher. Maybe sometimes I end up dialing out some 1K. But with this tone, I would rather dial out some around the 800 Hertz. And another frequency which can get annoying is around the 1.5K, and that is especially in a recording tone. It can interfere with maybe the punch of the snare and the kick. So these are the frequencies which are usually helpful in a live situation. Of course, I wouldn't boost these in a very narrow bandwidth. Here it sounds also very well, cardboxy or honky, but if I boost frequencies, usually I use a wider range. But this was just to show you how these frequencies sound. And when dialing out, as I said, I use a smaller range. And usually, if I dial these out, then it's in a recording situation, at least more than in a live situation. I find me dialing out the other frequencies in a live situation too. But this is one, especially for recording, which the guitar can interfere with the drums, as I said. And if you want to have a very punchy snare drum, then maybe you can get rid of a bit of these frequencies in the guitar. And as a result, you have a very wide guitar tone, but still the drums are audible over the guitars. So this is one advice for recording. And as I said, if I boost frequencies, then I use a wider range. So usually something in between maybe 0.5 up to 1.4. And for example, if you want to have a little bit more fatter guitar tone, you can boost the frequencies maybe around 750 Hertz. Of course, if you dial out the 800 Hertz, then you wouldn't boost the 750 necessarily. But if you want to shape your overall guitar tone and not dialing out nasty frequencies, then maybe an overall mid boost can be down here. Also in a wider range. I wouldn't do it with 5 dB usually, but maybe about 2 dB. But also the 400 Hertz are sometimes very helpful if you would like to have a more pleasant guitar tone. But with this tone, I wouldn't boost it that much. And also there are other frequencies which can be boosted to get some different results. So, for example, the 100 Hertz is more for, well, the bass, the fatness of the guitar without altering the overall character of the guitar tone that much. So, for example, if I boost that here, you can compensate a little bit of the cut. But in a live situation, I wouldn't do it that much. Sometimes I do it in a recording situation. And the 3K is maybe for the edge of the guitar tone if you would like to have your riffage more percussive. But I recommend to be careful with boosting these frequencies too much. If you have an overall balanced guitar tone, you don't need to boost anything. So usually I start dialing out the nasty frequencies. Let's see how it sounds. Situation. Okay, with the modulation, there we have it. Delay. Okay, as this is the recording preset, maybe the effects are not set properly. As you can see here, it's switched to another channel of the EQ. So now our 6K are back. Let's go to our dial in. Okay. Have to program it a little bit. Let's see if we find some decent stereo delay here. Stereo tape. I like some kind of dual delay or ping pong delay, so let's choose this. Without the EQ. And as I said, in a live situation, I would dial out way more of the highs. And but even if you cut the highs somewhere, dialing out the 6K is still helpful. Because if you're using a high cut, it's cutting, but it's not cutting immediately. It has a slope, and the 6K would be still audible usually. So, for example, here I'm cutting 6K as you see. But if I would leave these in, you would still hear a lot of them. Dialing these out is always a good idea. And I recommend not to look at the curve too much, just use your ears. So I hope this helps you to get the best out of your modeling unit. Regarding hiking tones, if you've got any questions, please post them in the comment section. And as I said, please contact me if you would like to get my tones. Consider subscribing to this channel. See ya.